Imagine waking up one morning to discover that your taxes have dropped, your take-home pay is higher, and the financial future of your family looks a little brighter, at least on paper. It sounds like a dream come true, right? But what if that same dream comes with a darker side? Skyrocketing national debt, deep cuts to healthcare for millions, and an economic gamble with potential consequences for decades to come. This is the crossroads America finds itself standing at today, as lawmakers clash over what just might be the most consequential piece of legislation in a generation, Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. So what's really at stake here? Will this mega bill deliver prosperity and opportunity for all, as its champions promise? Or is it a colossal bet that puts the nation's financial future and the well-being of millions on the line? And how did America even arrive at this moment, where one bill could redraw the economic and social map for years to come? To answer these questions, we'll need to dive deep into the history of America's recent tax policies, the relentless tug-of-war between economic growth and social safety nets, and, above all, the intense political struggle unraveling right now on Capitol Hill. If you thought giant economic decisions were made behind closed doors, think again. This time, the stakes are out in the open, and it's a fight everyone should care about. Let's start with how we got here. Back in 2017, President Trump and a Republican Congress pushed through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a sweeping reform that dramatically lowered taxes for individuals and corporations. Supporters argued it would unleash investment, boost wages, and make America more competitive. Critics countered that the bulk of the benefits went to the wealthy and big business, with only modest and temporary relief for ordinary families. But one thing was clear: these changes weren't meant to last forever. Most of the major tax cuts for individuals were set to expire after 2025, a classic legislative trick to reduce the apparent cost of the law. That means, in just a few short years, millions of Americans are facing the prospect of their taxes going up, unless Congress acts. Fast forward to today, and the clock is ticking. With the original tax cuts soon to lapse, leaders in Washington are under pressure to either extend, expand, or overhaul the system once again. Enter Trump's newest play, the audaciously titled One Big Beautiful Bill. But this isn't just another tax tweak. This is a legislative juggernaut, one that packs several colossal policy shifts into a single package. Here's what's on the table. First, the extension of those 2017 tax cuts, which puts a few thousand extra dollars in the pockets of average families right away. According to the Tax Policy Center, middle-income households stand to see an average cut of about $20,800 in 2026. For many, that's a car payment, groceries for the month, or a cushion against inflation. The bill sweetens the deal with a temporary boost to the standard deduction: $2,000 more for joint filers, $1,500 for heads of household, $1,000 for single filers between 2025 and 2028. There are targeted breaks, too, like a temporary deduction for tip income for workers in the service industry, one of the pandemic's most battered sectors. Businesses also cash in. There's a temporary return of 100% bonus depreciation for short-lived investments, which could spur a wave of new spending by companies wanting to upgrade their equipment or expand operations. For the wealthiest Americans, the bill offers a permanent boost in the estate and gift tax exemption to an inflation-indexed $15 million starting in 2026. High net worth families could pass on massive fortunes with little to no tax bite, cementing generational wealth. And there's more. The bill aims to make the state and local tax SALT deduction cap permanent, a move that particularly affects high earners in states like New York, California, and New Jersey. The cap is set at $30,000 but phases down for single filers earning over $200,000 and joint filers over $400,000. But every action has a reaction. To pay for this bonanza of tax cuts, at least in part, the bill takes a literal scalpel to America's healthcare safety net, with the Congressional Budget Office projecting nearly $700 billion in Medicaid cuts over the next decade. That's not just a number. It's millions of low-income families facing uncertainty over their health coverage, a lifeline at risk. The legislation also seeks to repeal several green energy tax subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act after 2025, signaling a dramatic policy shift just as the world races to combat climate change. All told, the Tax Foundation estimates the bill would reduce federal revenues by a whopping $4.1 trillion between 2025 and 2034. If you feel dizzy hearing that figure, you're not alone. The tax provisions would reduce federal revenues by $4.1 trillion between 2025 and 2034, warns a Tax Foundation report, underscoring just how seismic this fiscal earthquake would be. But here's something that should make every American stop and think. Despite the promises of economic growth, that hole in the Treasury doesn't fill itself. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, the bill would add trillions to the national debt over the next decade, exacerbating fiscal challenges. In plain English, America could be mortgaging its future to pay for today's giveaways. This isn't the first time the United States has walked the tightrope between tax relief and rising debt. In fact, it's almost a tradition. And each time the country is forced to grapple with a pivotal question: how much debt is too much? At what point does fiscal freedom become fiscal recklessness? Let's take a moment to remember the last time major tax cuts were on the table. In the early 2000s, President George W. Bush's tax cuts were celebrated as a victory for the middle class and a boost for the economy. Yet over the years, critics pointed to ballooning budget deficits, a widening gap between the rich and everyone else, and mounting pressure on programs like Social Security and Medicare. Fast forward to 2017, and Trump's first big tax law was sold as a new era of investment and prosperity. But did it deliver? Studies and economists remain deeply divided. Wages rose, but not as dramatically as promised. Corporate profits soared, but investment only saw a modest bump. The deficit swelled. And now, America is still grappling with the consequences, debating whether to double down or change course. Which brings us to the present. The One Big Beautiful Bill is not just a rerun. It's bigger, bolder, and riskier in every way. Critics like Rahm Emanuel, President Obama's former chief of staff, have been quick to sound the alarm. As Emanuel writes, Trump and the GOP Congress want to cut taxes on well-connected billionaires by slashing health care for working families. That might not be corruption the way Washington good government groups define it, but it's how the public sees a corrupt system at work. The battle lines are drawn. Supporters hail the bill as a necessary shot in the arm for a nation still recovering from COVID shocks and inflation. Opponents call it a cynical play that prioritizes the wealthy and corporate America, while everyday people see their safety nets shrink. And all the while, the country's debt clock keeps ticking upward, faster than ever before. But there's another layer to this drama: politics. Despite passing the House with solid Republican support, the bill faces a rocky path in the Senate. Not every GOP senator is on board. Some warn that the bill is fiscally reckless, others balk at the Medicaid cuts, and a few worry about the optics of handing more benefits to the rich in an election year. Bloomberg's Eric Wasson points out, the bill faces significant hurdles in the Senate due to Republican infighting. This is no slam dunk. Every day the political calculus changes as senators weigh the risks to their own re-election and the impact on their home state voters. It's a moment of high drama, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If the bill passes, the national debt is set to balloon, potentially forcing painful choices down the road: slashing spending on infrastructure or education, raising taxes elsewhere, or, worst case, sparking a crisis of confidence among global investors. If it fails, the current tax cuts will expire, leaving many Americans with higher tax bills and less money to spend, just as economic uncertainty grows. And so the fundamental question hangs in the air, unanswered. Can the U.S. break free from this cycle of tax cuts and mounting debt? Or is the nation doomed to repeat the fiscal mistakes of its past, passing the burden to future generations? As the Senate hurtles toward a make-or-break vote, the battle lines are hardening, the lobbying is intensifying, and the fate of the American economy hangs in the balance. Will lawmakers find a way to thread this impossible needle? Or will political chaos and gridlock leave millions in limbo? That's the dilemma facing America right now, a moment of enormous risk and even greater opportunity. In the next part of our story, we'll dive deep into what could happen next, who stands to win or lose, and what history and experts reveal about the most likely path forward. But first, let's ask, is this bill really the economic booster shot its backers predict, or a ticking time bomb waiting to explode? Let's pick up right where we left off. The fate of Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill is now the burning question on everyone's mind, not only for what it means today, but for the unpredictable road it could send the country down tomorrow. All eyes are fixed on the Senate, where the battle lines have been drawn and where America's future fiscal destiny could be decided with a single vote. This isn't just policy. It's a high-stakes gamble that could echo for generations. Imagine two very different futures. In the first, the Senate greenlights Trump's bill. The ink dries. Tax cuts, some of the boldest in modern history, kick in for millions. You might see that extra bump in your paycheck in the short run. Businesses enjoy generous new deductions, and the estate tax exemption soars to heights only the wealthiest can reach. There's a surge of optimism on Wall Street. The economy is being unleashed, the headlines shout. Growth is back on track. But under the surface, an invisible meter starts ticking. The Tax Foundation estimates this bill would slash $4.1 trillion from federal revenues over the next decade. That's more than the GDP of Germany vanishing from the Treasury. The Congressional Budget Office adds, in chilling numbers, that nearly $700 billion will be stripped from Medicaid. Millions who rely on this safety net, children, the elderly, people with disabilities, suddenly live with uncertainty. Eric Wasson from Bloomberg puts it bluntly. Even the Republican Party is in turmoil over the risks. Some fear this could spark a debt crisis that makes future emergencies like pandemics or recessions much harder to handle. As the years roll on, the initial glow of tax relief may begin to fade. The average middle-class family gets a $20,800 tax cut in 2026, says the Tax Policy Center. It feels like a relief. But over time, as certain business breaks and deductions phase out, that relief shrinks. By 2034, the average after-tax boost drops to just 2.5%. Prices rise, borrowing costs climb, and if inflation rears its head, those savings evaporate with every trip to the grocery store. Meanwhile, the national debt keeps swelling. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget warns, trillions added to the debt now mean a leaner, more uncertain tomorrow. It's not just numbers on a ledger. It's funding at risk for schools, infrastructure, research, and public health. And then, the political fallout. This bill could hand a loaded weapon to the opposition. Rahm Emanuel, Obama's former chief of staff, writes, "It's tax cuts for the wealthy, health care cuts for the many." That message is simple and powerful. In the 2026 midterms, Democrats are poised to make this the rallying cry. They argue the bill is proof the system is rigged, tax relief for billionaires, at the expense of the working and middle class. The stage is set for a national referendum, not just on economics, but on fairness, trust, and the very soul of American government. Now picture the alternate path. The bill fails in the Senate. All those tax cuts from the 2017 Trump era begin to sunset. Across the country, tax bills rise. Households that came to depend on those few thousand extra dollars per year are forced to tighten belts. Consumer spending takes a hit. Businesses, staring at the loss of their bonus depreciation and other incentives, pull back on hiring or investment. Some economists warn this could tip the fragile post-pandemic recovery back into recession. Others see a silver lining, an opportunity for real, bipartisan reform. Instead of letting the old cycle repeat, Congress could hammer out a compromise that targets relief where it's needed most, lifting low- and middle-income families, while finally doing something about the ballooning deficit. There's talk of preserving some tax benefits, but coupling them with long-overdue investments in infrastructure, education, and healthcare. Imagine a bill born not of crisis, but of consensus. These futures are not predetermined. They hinge on choices yet to be made and on the will of voters and lawmakers alike. But no matter which scenario comes to pass, one thing is certain. The consequences, fiscal, political, and personal, will reach far beyond the next election. So what does all this mean for you? Whether you're a single parent, a business owner, a retiree, or just someone juggling bills in uncertain times, the implications are huge. If the bill becomes law, you might enjoy a temporary tax break, a little more breathing room, a momentary sigh of relief. For a family of 4, that could mean an average of $20,800 next year. For tipped workers, a limited-time deduction could finally mean those hard-earned dollars go a bit further. Business owners might jump at renewed bonus depreciation, meaning more equipment, maybe even new jobs in your local community. But it comes with a catch. The tax relief is front-loaded, short-lived. By the time your kids are heading off to college, those benefits are shrinking or gone, but the debt remains. And if you, your parents, or your neighbors rely on Medicaid or other safety net programs, the outlook is even more tenuous. Cuts of $700 billion have real faces. Fewer doctor visits covered, higher costs for prescription drugs, longer wait times for services, even outright loss of coverage for the most vulnerable. On the other hand, if the bill fails, prepare for higher tax bills, but also for a national reckoning. This could force the two parties to finally sit down and negotiate a new tax code that doesn't just reward the rich or punish the poor, but tries to actually balance growth with responsibility. It could mean targeted help for those who need it, while finally putting the brakes on runaway debt. Practical takeaway number 1: stay informed. The details matter. A flashy headline about tax cuts or healthcare slashed doesn't tell you where you stand. Learn which brackets you fall into, which deductions you use, what benefits you count on for your family. Laws like this don't just shape abstract numbers. They shape your daily life, your sense of security, your path to opportunity. Practical lesson number 2. Get involved. The fate of this bill is not sealed in a smoky backroom. Lawmakers are watching their inboxes, their town halls, their poll numbers. If there's ever a moment when your voice matters, it's now. Reach out to your senators. Ask them where they stand. Demand real answers, not scripted talking points. This is your future. You have the right to weigh in. And finally, watch for the ripple effects. Whether this bill passes or fails, the debate will define the next decade of American politics. It's not just about tax rates. It's about who we trust to make the rules, what we value as a country, and whether we're willing to tackle hard problems rather than just kicking the can down the road. So, will Trump's one big beautiful bill spark new growth, or is it a ticking fiscal time bomb? Here is where the evidence points. In the short term, yes. Many Americans will see their taxes go down. Businesses will enjoy new breaks. A jolt of optimism might boost the economy, at least for a little while. But the structure is precarious. Most of the bill's benefits accrue to high earners and corporations. The middle class gets some help, but it slides away over time. For low-income families, the picture is even bleaker. Reduced healthcare access, more uncertainty, fewer lifelines when times get tough. And the debt keeps rising. Each borrowed dollar today means less room for emergencies, for public investments, for the big ideas of tomorrow. Experts warn, this is the same debt spiral we've seen before, only bigger. The real secret, hidden in the fine print of Washington's biggest bills, is that the biggest risks are rarely immediate. The costs, the trade-offs, the pain, they're backloaded, kicked down the road, left for someone else to solve. The benefits, the headlines, the political credit, they're handed out today. That's the trap, and it's one both parties have fallen into time and again. So as Congress faces its moment of truth, remember this: prosperity built on mounting debt, on cutting the threadbare safety net, is fragile. Growth that widens inequality and hollows out the middle class will not last. America stands at a crossroads, and what happens now will ripple into the lives of millions for years to come. Don't let the noise drown out the facts. Demand transparency, demand responsibility, demand policies that work for everyone, not just for the well-connected few. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into the policies shaping our world. Got questions or a story about how these proposals could affect you? Drop a comment below. We're listening. And here's a secret fact. Buried in the hundreds of pages of this bill is a 4-year targeted tax break for tipped workers. It's small, it's temporary, but for millions in hospitality and service jobs, it's a rare acknowledgement from Washington that their struggles matter, if only for a moment. Sometimes the biggest stories hide in the